I first met Tammy Gooler Loeb in 2020. I felt a pretty immediate connection to her, and so we became friends. And even though we don't live anywhere near each other, we've had the good fortune to spend time together in person. In fact, Tammy joined me in Bath, England for my first ever Rediscover Your Spark travel experience in May 2024. And we went back to England together in the fall of 2025 for a leadership event called Thinkers 50. But beyond our mutual love of travel and adventures, Tammy is also a smart coach and author of the book Work from the Inside Out. In today's conversation, Tammy shares some of her thoughts on why it's so important to start from what motivates and drives you internally as you're making decisions about your life, as well as some just really smart life decisions. Yes.
And I recommend that to people, that if you're going to go into a situation where you think you're going to be uncomfortable, try that hat on. Try on no expectations and just show up and see how you can show up without an expectation, because you will show up differently.
Yes.
And you'll get a whole lot more out of it that way.
Hi, I'm Dayna Del Val, author, TEDx speaker, and visibility coach for leaders ready to affect change and become audaciously visible. On this podcast, I sit down with leaders from across backgrounds to explore the space where curiosity, connection, and progress meet, especially in a polarized world. Welcome to Braave Middle Ground. Tammy, welcome to Braave Middle Ground.
Thank you so much, Dayna. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Well, I'm always happy to spend time with you. So this, I expect, will be an enlightening conversation for me and the audience. So let's start with the first question, Tammy. What does middle ground mean to you? How do you define it?
Middle ground means to me that we're not at one extreme or the other. And I don't want to sound too glib and say, oh, we're in the middle. but I think when people are trying to find their way in life, in all kinds of aspects of life, and let's say it's new territory or it's something that feels challenging, they sometimes go to this all or nothing place. You know, it's either at one end of the spectrum or the other. And I think there's a lot of things in between that all or nothing place that can give them a lot of really great answers or great places to look. And so I say, you know, be curious. What's in the middle? What's in between that all or nothing? Because when people only look at the extremes, they start to feel limited and they feel like they don't have choices. So the middle ground to me means, oh, look at all these other choices and places I can get curious about.
I love that. And it feels very kind of anti-American in the sense of we tend to be very binary thinkers. It's black or white. It's right or wrong. It's good or bad. And I think you're absolutely right. Very few things are 100% one way or the other. Most things in our personal lives, our professional lives, are kind of stuck in that messy middle. And it's our job to figure out how to navigate that and how to get comfortable with it.
Yeah. And you know, I think you're right about the un-American thing, because I think about you know, how in the U.S. it's like, you know, bigger is better, you know, let's get more. And it's like, maybe that isn't what you need, you know? Maybe you need a little less, or you need something just different. And where are you going to find that? It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's not going to be at either end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I say, you know, and maybe the middle, it might be messy in the middle, or it might be messy getting there. Or it might be messy because you got to weed through some things to make some choices or kind of discern things and figure it out. But, you know, it could be kind of fun. You know, if you I think about a kid, you know, doing finger painting, that's messy, but it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. What I was thinking about as you were talking about it is this idea that the eye of a storm is utterly calm. So you're right. You have to get through perhaps a tremendous amount of chaos and noise and cacophony. But once you hit that center, you might find that that is your place of absolute certainty or
Mhm.
centeredness or calm or however you like to think of it. And you can't get there if you're unwilling to be curious enough to see what it even looks like to get there.
Right. Or at least believe that it might be there. You know,
Yeah.
like give yourself the chance to take a look there to see maybe that is where the calm is, or where the more grounded place is, or maybe where the next challenge is that you would welcome. You know,
Mm,
it might be another messy place, but it might be the messiness that you're looking for as opposed to the messiness you're not welcoming.
right. Right. Yeah, because again, finger painting is incredibly messy, but not in a detrimental way. I mean, within reason. I guess if you
Right.
go after the walls, it's a problem. But generally, it's just a messy endeavor that ends with a piece of art.
Yeah.
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 So, Tammy, you wrote a book kind of early on when I knew you called Work from the Inside Out. You can see it if you're watching the YouTube version of this conversation.
Yeah.
And I feel like just even the title of that really speaks to this idea of what's in the middle or what's in the inverse of what we typically think of. So, talk to me a little bit about your thesis around that book because it's
Mhm.
such an interesting idea.
Oh, thank you. So, when I talk about work from the inside out, what I'm really pointing to is the idea that I think when people look at how they make choices about their work or their professional lives, or honestly, anything that is something they do purposefully. So it doesn't even have to be about work or professional exactly. It's anything that somebody is choosing to do that has meaning for them. That there be some base or foundation that comes from within them, whether it's intuitive or sometimes we talk about our inner voice telling us something that feels right to us. Very often, especially in our earlier years, we're listening to a lot of other
Mhm.
influences, whether it's, a well intentioned adult, parent, teacher, other person who says, oh, you'd be good at this or you'd be good at that. You should become a thus and such. And then you grow up thinking, oh, yeah, I should follow this thread because I'm good at it. And then you follow that thread and you wake up one day, maybe you're 38 years old or 42 or whatever, and you say, I followed that thread, and you know what? I don't really like this very much. I'm good
Mhm.
at it, but I don't really like it. And that's because you did it from the outside going
Oh,
in. So that's just an example of what I mean by inside out is what inside of you was saying to you probably years and years earlier, you know, I'm good at this, but I don't really like it that much. So there are things in life that we find ourselves needing to do or have to do that maybe we don't love, but we understand why we're doing them. But then
mhm.
there are a lot of other things that we might want to really rethink or stop and just listen to that. There's that voice in our heads that's telling us, or in our hearts, telling us, this really isn't suiting me and I really want to find a different way. And sometimes we don't know what that other way is, or we need time to kind of listen for that further because we've been so accustomed to looking at the external influences that tell us, well, this is the right way to do this. I think when I was growing up, the image of a successful life, a career path would be, you go to school, you graduate, and you study something that will prepare you for a profession, and you get on that ladder, and then you climb the ladder and you prove yourself, and then you climb a little higher, and it feels very linear. And the
Mhm.
fact is that even back then, but way more now, that's not how it works. It just doesn't work that way. Careers aren't built in a linear way in most cases. In some cases they are, but most are not. So, and especially if you're listening more from the inside going outward, it's definitely not linear. It's usually, circular or squiggly, and because you're building something that's based on your values and the things that work well for you in your life. You're weighing out a number of different factors. It doesn't mean that I'm not even talking about things like, go for your dream job, follow your passions. I think those are the kinds of things people think about when they think about, inside out. It could be something you're passionate about, or it could be something that just means a lot to you. But it could also have a very practical side. If that's part of your core values, is to make sure that you're taking care of very practical things in your life, then that's part of the package for you. That is inside out for you. Make sure you have a roof over your head and food on the table and some savings or whatever that looks like for you. Some people really have a very high value for stability and security. And in this day and age, it's become even more important for a lot of people. And yet, those kinds of qualities are not as attainable or as easily attainable as they used to be in people's working world. They have to really create more of that for themselves. So those things have become more important, but not necessarily, I would say, at the sacrifice of doing something that just feels safe and secure, but you can barely get out of bed in the morning to go and do it every day.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good litmus test. How do you feel getting up in the morning, or can you get up in the morning? And if you're having trouble with that, that's a really good clue that you may be living your life from the outside going in, not going inside out.
It's so interesting, Tammy, because I've known about your work for the 5 years I've known you. And we've spent a lot of time together. In fact, as I was listening to you or thinking about this conversation, I realized you're my first guest on Braave Middle Ground who's also done Rediscover Your Spark work with me. So never until you talked about work from the inside out right now have I listened and thought, there's a lot of commonality. The language is very, very different. First of all, you have much more of a business background than I do. I have zero business background, and you are coming out of having worked in a very traditional way. And so I think your language speaks to people who have that experience. But at the core, I think we're both really helping people stop, get quiet, and just reflect on whether or not what they're doing is really what they want to be doing. Yeah. And like you, I mean, there's for sure a place for passion and, Absolutely. What am I called to be and what is my larger purpose and all of that. There's definitely a place for that.
Yeah.
And we can't all live that way all the time. When I was a young single mom in income-based housing, I lived as close to my passion as I could, but I also had to put food on the table.
Yeah, right.
And so it's kind of a balancing act of how much can you hold and build your dream or your next version or however you want to think about it, and then how much do you have to simply pull yourself out of bed, whether you're inspired by your work or not, because without work, you won't even have a bed, much less a roof and a table and all the other things.
Right.
But it's so interesting to me because I've never really considered how aligned our work is. And now that I'm considering it, it makes perfect sense then, of course, that we're friends because we sort of seem to be moving through the world, at least at this stage of our lives, in a similar fashion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I would also say that even when you are, you have that feeling of you have to get up, because you got to put food on the table kind of thing. I've seen people who find their way into work that is just serving, that purpose, that kind of transactional purpose, like it's a means to an end. And yet sometimes even those jobs, you go to work and maybe what you're doing doesn't matter so much, but you find that the people you're working with are people you enjoy being around, or you're dealing with customers who are nice to deal with, or you get to be outdoors for a certain job and you like being outdoors. So I think there may be things that you end up doing in a job where maybe it's not your ideal job, but there are aspects of it that make it a pleasant place to be. I remember I had a job in high school where I was working in a kitchen in a nursing home, and I was preparing the breakfast trays for a 175 bed nursing home.
Wow.
So 175 trays, and I would go in late afternoon, early evening, the day before, prepare all these breakfast trays, minus the hot food that would go on them the night before. And it was a very, very routine job. So there wasn't anything particularly exciting about the job, but there were all these other like really cool high school kids working in the kitchen. And then we had this cook in the kitchen who was this older gentleman who was kind of like everyone's grandfather. And it was just a fun place to work, even though the work itself was very mundane. And so it was fun to go to work. And I think that sometimes people don't see things that, to me, that's partly the middle ground. It's like, what you're doing for work, it may matter to you, but then think about the whole picture, because sometimes, in fact, there's even research that shows this, that most people who feel engaged at work, they feel engaged at work because they like the work culture they're in. They like the people. They feel like they're learning new things. Now, I will say that in that high school job, I don't know that I was really learning new things work-wise. I might have been learning new things from some of the other, kids.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a learning experience per se. But I was definitely feeling engaged in that way. So, I think these are important things for us to be thinking about in terms of just giving ourselves a chance to not box ourselves into thinking that something has to be, the ultimate or the best. And I think that's where we get trapped in this American life of ours. Like, it has to be the best.
Right.
And it's like, well, the best is really relative to whatever you think the best should look like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So when I was the CEO of the arts nonprofit I ran, in so many ways, that was a really interesting job. It was dynamic. I was really getting to define my role. I spent my days in and around artistic people or conversing with other people about the arts. It was very diverse in terms of the kind of work I did, the personalities I dealt with. There was no common day at that job. And most often people would say to me things like, you must just wake up every day excited to go to work because you just get to be in and around the arts all day long. And I will say what I used to say all the time inside my office: this would be an amazing job if I never had to deal with artists. And I say that as an artist. So I'm, speaking poorly of myself. Artists are hard to deal with. We are a very difficult breed of people, which is what makes us so compelling and engaging from afar. Not all artists. I'm making big, bold statements. But there's a complexity to working with artists that is unique and very different than, say, the tedium of an assembly line job or the boredom of a cubicle job where you know exactly what you're going to do, and at 5 o'clock you turn your computer off and home you go.
Right.
So there's good and bad to all of the jobs. And I think most often we think about the jobs we know we don't want. Well, I don't want to be a construction worker, or I don't want to, do manual labor or whatever it is. But what I really want is to lead an organization. Well, guess what? The leader of the organization oftentimes is looking longingly at the person whose job is very clear cut and very prescribed and saying, oh my gosh, what would I give to go home at night and not think about work.
Right.
I think it's the grass is always greener
Yeah.
syndrome that I think a lot of us suffer with because everything looks better when you're not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you come across those people who, no matter what, they're just happy people and they love what they're doing and they seem to be relatively content in almost any situation they're in. And I'll tell you where I see that thread in those people. They're natural learners. They're curious. They just stay curious. They stay open and curious. I'm thinking about a couple of people I've interviewed on my podcast, which is by the same name as my book. And I think it takes a really unique individual to sort of maintain that kind of stance. And it's not even that they have to maintain it. It's just the way they're built.
Yeah,
It's really
I think
interesting because they've held very different kinds of jobs over the years. They've dealt with some of them really, intense, like organizational politics. They've held very high leadership roles where they've had tons of responsibility and stress in ways that I know I would have crumbled, and yet they just like somehow kind of, I want to say glided above it, but they definitely held a mental framework that allowed them to still maintain that love of whatever they were involved with, to not let it really suck the life out of them, I guess.
Yeah.
So interesting, though. Not everyone's built that way. I certainly am not.
I am certainly not built that way. No. A person that you and I both know who is built that way and is truly one of the only people I've ever met like that is Dr. Masmary. He has a level of contentment that I am both envious of and incredulous of because I feel like, how are you content in this kind of garbage situation? He's one of the few people I've ever met who's not really defined by what he does. And I didn't think I was until I left my high-profile job and discovered that, oh, wow, I guess I don't matter anymore in this way that I had gotten very comfortable mattering. And that was a real eye-opening moment to me. But Maz is happy to do anything. I mean, Maz will tell you his first job was plucking chickens at the local butcher's. And he doesn't say that like, can you imagine a worse job? Or I couldn't wait to get out. Or boy, I wasn't going to go to college. And then I had that job and it sent me straight to school. He liked that job. How is that possible?
He's blessed.
He's blessed, as am I, to have someone in my house who is that affable. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's not from a place of not caring or lackadaisical or no work ethic or anything. He just, well, I always call him my gigantic lucky leprechaun. He just sort of shows up and can find contentment. It's really impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that.
I love it too because it's so far from who I am.
Well, but it's great to be around it.
Yes.
I can imagine. I mean, I'm sure there are moments where it can be a little irritating, but
well, luckily
but
I
for the
care
most
enough about
part, you
everything for
appreciate
both of us. I
Could you
joke that,
stop being so damn
could you
content.
stop being so happy, Masmary? Yeah. I always joke that he's the most overeducated tea maker and server on our Rediscover Your Spark trips because that's a perfect example. No part of him thinks, I have a PhD from one of the top universities in the world, right? And you want me to bring in more tea and biscuits? Huh, that's interesting.
I witnessed that
Yeah.
firsthand, and I thought he was the warmest, most welcoming, accommodating person. I felt cared for, and yet he did not feel intrusive at all.
No.
Like it was just the perfect balance of making me feel welcome, but also making me feel like I could do what I needed to do there.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely delightful.
Yeah, he's a funny, extraordinary duck. I feel very lucky to have him in my life, if
Yeah.
only to aspire to, sort of glean some of that contentment from
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. Yeah. Let it rub off a little.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Tammy, what are you talking to people about in your coaching world or in your podcast conversations in this era of new disruption
Yeah.
around AI and the political situation and tariffs and all these things which 5 years ago weren't even really words we were using and
Yeah.
now are just part of the zeitgeist of work. How are you navigating that with people? Or what are
I
you
like
finding?
I like the way you say zeitgeist of work. That's a good one.
It is a good phrase.
Makes me feel so intellectual. Um, well, I'm glad you brought that up actually, because I was just having a conversation with somebody about this, and it's something that I get on my soapbox about quite a bit in terms of the notion that we all, or most of us, I want to say we all, because that's sort of going to the extreme, right? But we all need to we all need to really take more ownership of the path or the journey that we each want to be on and get clear about who we are, because there is so much noise out there and so many things that are moving and changing at such a rapid pace. There's no way that each one of us can keep up with it. There's a lot of things going on out there that are both, breeding uncertainty, breeding a feeling of disturbance on many levels. I mean, it's I'm stating the obvious in some ways, but all the things that you mentioned, can create a feeling of people feeling like they have almost no control over their future, their environments, their lives. And I think some people do fall prey to that. And I would say, don't do that to yourself if you can help it. Really unpack the kinds of things you know about yourself, your strengths, your preferences, your values, and think about the people who are in your life whose either counsel, perspectives you find give you a sense of groundedness or a sense of direction. Likewise, there are some of those same people or others who look to you for that as well. So my point here being that we each are responsible for our own journey, our own careers, our lives. We have to really take charge of that more now than ever before. Many of us were raised at a time when we thought our employers would take care of us to some degree, and that there were infrastructures and places that we could lean in on that if we did our part
Yeah.
and worked hard enough, we could count on those structures, those institutions to, reward us and give us a sense of greater stability and security. And those things have really dissipated significantly. And now we're at a time where they're just all over the place. They're just changing, and a lot of them are broken. And I'm not trying to paint a gloom and doom picture here as much as to say the reality is it's just changing like day by day. And so even in the age of AI, where some people are afraid of AI, or some people are resenting AI, or some people are celebrating I would say learn about it, understand what you can about it in terms of how it may or may not be useful to you. I've been certainly doing that and finding it can be really delightful and a lot of fun to work with. but it doesn't replace who you are and who you need to be in the world. It's a tool.
Yeah.
And yet, but don't be afraid of it either. It because it's constantly changing. So just notice things and see what appeals to you, what really sits well with you, and believe in yourself. Trust yourself that you're going to move through things and do right by yourself. And part of doing right by yourself is making sure that you have a support system that you are reciprocal with. It's not just you leaning in on others. So I know I'm talking in generalities, but I've come up with a framework for this when it comes to careers that I call be the CEO of your career. And CEO stands for being curious, being engaged, and taking ownership. And the curiosity is about staying open and curious, asking questions, not taking everything at face value, not going from one extreme to the other, but looking at that middle ground. Being engaged means talking to people, looking for resources, understanding that a lot of times when we start to feel uncertain, it's because we don't have all the information we need. So get more information before you start putting yourself into some kind of panic or feeling vulnerable, when in fact there may be more information you need so that you can make better decisions about what you need to do for yourself. And taking ownership then is you've got more information. Now you can own whatever decisions you're making, even sometimes if you have to make decisions you're not thrilled about.
Yeah.
So I think, though, that people really need to embrace these things and know themselves enough and know when they don't know something so they can find out more. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's not exhausting. It can be exhausting doing all these things, but I think you have to approach things this way in order to navigate a world that's in constant chaos right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of chaos out there.
Yeah, there is.
And yet I think we can find the quiet spots, the moments where we look around in our own lives and we can see where the stability points are and the people we can count on, and not lose sight of that as well, and not just think everything's chaotic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to keep all that in focus because we are definitely living in a time where things are, changing by the moment. And it's not the first time that people have been through something like this, but it's the first time that many of us have seen things at this extreme, but it's not the first time for everyone. And
No.
in the U.S., I think in the U.S., we're not as accustomed to this kind of fluctuation as I think people in other countries have experienced more recently. So, we've been spoiled and we're very privileged too. So we have to put these things into perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, which is hard to do when it's your bank account, your mortgage, your career. I mean, it's hard to kind of take that high road stance of, well, what goes around comes around, those kinds of things.
It is, and that's why I say don't think you have to do it all by yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, if you think that you start to get kind of incredulous or frustrated or feel that kind of raw vulnerability about it, remind yourself that there are other people who care about you, who you can, bounce some ideas off of or get another perspective on it, so that you're not just churning and burning inside and feeling like self-destructive at that point.
Yeah.
That really don't stay alone with these things. Find other people, find more information if you don't have it, and do the things you need to do to reinforce yourself so that you can move forward with a sense of groundedness and strength as you go forward, and try to enjoy yourself a little bit too. Don't lose your sense of humor, and don't take yourself too seriously. I think that's the other thing, is some people really take themselves, or they start to take themselves so seriously that it's very hard to see the full picture when you put yourself in one serious lane like that. And look, the world's just too crazy to take it all too seriously. You'll just drown in seriousness.
Yeah, it's very true. And it's great, great advice. I'm storing it as for myself. I often can lean that way. And so it's just a good
No.
reminder. I know. Don't start with me, Tammy. So I want to change gears quickly before we wrap up, because you are the reason that I went to Thinkers 50 in the fall of 2025. You and I were having a conversation, and you sort of casually dropped that you wanted to go, but thought it would be fun to have someone to go with, and would that be me? And lo and behold, my giant lucky leprechaun said to me, yes, you should absolutely go. And, not that I need his permission, but I do run things past him. And he was so supportive of it that lo and behold, there you and I were together in London for a week. So I'm curious to know, now that we're some months out away from this event called Thinkers 50, which to a small faction of the world is like the Oscars for business thought leaders, and to everyone else is nothing they've ever heard of.
Right.
But I'm wondering, do you have takeaways from that you've been sort of sitting on or reflecting on that have impacted the way you have thought about your coaching or your own journey since we got back?
I don't know that I have specific takeaways from Thinkers 50. I think I have takeaways from the decision to go to Thinkers 50.
Me too. Say more.
So, I think you and I both had some ideas or reasons to not go to Thinkers 50.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably why I did ask you to go with me, because we both had some resistance about it. And yet I decided to go, and I really did want kind of a partner in crime to kind of sort of take that little chip off my shoulder and say, you know what? We belong there as much as anyone else does. And, we went, and I think we had a very good time. And we got to connect with a lot of fascinating and wonderful people, many of whom are in our recognized expert community that we both belong to, Dory Clark's recognized expert community. And that to me was really my big motivator for going, was to see a lot of those people, some of whom I've met in person before, and many of whom I had not met in person before. So that was really fun. And, it's a bit of a price to pay for a little bit of fun, but
For a dinner, yeah.
but it the actual Thinkers 50 event didn't really, it was a good experience overall. I don't regret going. Would I go again? As of now, I don't have any big plans to go.
Yeah.
But I can see, there were things that were discussed by some of the speakers that I found definitely interesting, many of which I'd either heard before or read about in, various articles, Harvard Business Review, things like that. So I would say, in terms of a content piece, it wasn't earth-shattering for me at all. Not to say like, oh, I'm so, on top of it all, but it was a cool event to just be a part of, for that time. So that's my thinking about Thinkers 50. I don't have I've never had a big desire to kind of be in the spotlight in that way. And yet it was great to be in and amongst a bunch of people who really care about what they're doing and were interested in some of whom really, really get into that, and some of whom were probably feeling the same way we were, which
Yeah.
was, what are we really doing here? Oh, well,
Yep.
we're here.
We're
And,
here. Yeah.
that's kind of my afterthoughts is, no, I'm not signing up again anytime soon, but I love seeing the other members of our recognized expert community, and that that's usually where it lands for me. And even then sometimes I have to kind of talk myself in or out of, you know, where I place myself in terms of
Yeah. Where
that
you belong.
prominence and all that.
Hmm.
But that's a thing I do to myself. It's not because I don't belong there. It's just have to we're always working on ourselves.
Yeah. It's a constant state of self-improvement. But um, I think that what you said is really resonates for me is this idea of we we walked through the doors with
Mhm.
our own insecurities, whatever they were, and we got inside and I'll just speak for myself. Nobody looked at me like, "I'm sorry, what are you doing here?" It was a very unusual experience because
Yeah.
we really were in the sort of top echelons of this very niche group of people. So
Yeah.
let's say 500 people in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if those are the top 500, I don't even know what number how many the hundreds of thousands of people back I go if we're just going to rank people. But it didn't really matter.
No.
There was just there was space, there was time. We'd paid our ticket, and we walked through the door. And to me, that was such a liberating moment because I had had other experiences in the past where I had also paid my ticket
Right.
and walked through a door and it went very poorly. And so to be able to exorcise that
Yes.
real chip on my shoulder, that real insecurity of, wow, I'm going to walk in and I don't know if all the spotlights in Guildhall are going to move off the stage and hit me square on so that everyone can go, look at that loser. I mean, I think that's essentially what I feared might happen.
Mhm.
And when it didn't, when I met interesting people, when I had great interactions, when I got to be with you, all these other things, it really it really reminded me of my own value, which only I get to define. Other people
Right.
can think about me what they want, but like Eleanor Roosevelt says, what other people think of me is none of my business.
That's right.
Um, and I really loved that it was a very expensive but absolutely positive experience that I never need to do again, probably.
Right.
And I'm so grateful I did it. And I'm so grateful that you reached out and asked me to go. Because let me tell you, if someone had handed me 75 things and said, what do you think you're going to do the end of October, beginning of November? That would have been number 76. So it's so great.
Yeah, I mean, somebody else sort of prompted me to go.
Yeah.
I wasn't really planning on going and said something to me like, "Well, why not? Why wouldn't you go?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, why wouldn't I go?" And it wasn't even about the money at that point as
No.
much as, and I went with no expectations.
Hmm.
That's sort of the way I held it, and that really helped me. It was a
Yes.
great experiment.
Yes.
And I recommend that to people that if you're going to go into a situation where you think you're going to be uncomfortable, try that hat on. Try
Mm.
on no expectations and just show up and see what how you can show up without an expectation because you will show up differently
Yes.
and you'll
Yes.
get a whole lot more out of it that way. You'll be liberated.
Yeah, that's that quiet middle again.
Mhm.
So if you can walk
Yep.
through the chaos of your own insecurities, the stories you're telling yourself, the way people are or are not responding
Yep.
to you, you
Yep.
can get to that centered place
Yeah.
where you're okay
Yeah.
regardless of what's going on around you.
Yeah. And just take it in, see what you notice without
Yeah.
all the filters that you're putting around it.
Mm.
And it it really changes how you're going to engage with people, what you're going to get out of it. And you're in it for you. You're not in it for all those stories you're telling yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's a
And
lovely way.
that's an inside out approach.
There it is. There it is. Way to circle back, Tammy. This has been a fantastic conversation. For everybody listening, obviously, I'll put links to Tammy's book and her site and everything in the notes, but check out Tammy's podcast, not just because I've been a past guest, but because she's talking to really interesting people about incredibly interesting things all around work from the inside out. So be sure and check that podcast out too. Tammy, thanks for joining me today. And thanks for being my friend and co-companion on this journey of entrepreneurship and coaching and thought leadership and life.
Thank you, Dayna. Right back at you.
All right. We'll talk soon. And everyone else, stay in touch. Thanks for joining me on Braave Middle Ground. I hope today's conversation inspired you to be audaciously visible and embrace the power of the in-between as you lead in your business, your community, and your life. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Your support grows our community and keeps these meaningful conversations going. To learn more about Audaciously Visible coaching and support with me, head to daynadelval.com for free resources, upcoming events, and ways to work with me. Braave Middle Ground is mixed by Sound Advice, and our music is by Quinn Del Val. Until next time, I'm Dayna Del Val. Stay curious, stay courageous, and stay connected.